Alright, hey and welcome to the basics of control warding. This is going to be useful for everyone, not just support players. Obviously everyone should be buying control wards, this particular the 5v5 game mode. If you don't know, Team WE recently played an absolutely incredible playoffs after going 113. I think there were a lot of reasons for their kind of uptick in performance. One of the most overlooked ones though is their warding. So this presentation tries to look at the warding decisions that WE made and the changes to those decisions, and kind of figure out why that might have impacted their game, and it's really tailored towards you to be able to use in your own 5v5 teams. So we're going to go over blue side control ward flow, blue side defense and offense, right? Remember, defense just means when you are losing the game, offense means when you are winning the game, but even more than that, defense kind of means when you are under a tower siege, right? You're unable to access your jungle, things like this. Offense means you're in the enemy jungle, you're sieging their towers. Then we're going to look at the same things for red side, right? Red side control ward flow, red side defense and offense, and the do-nots of warding, because I think that this kind of presentation, especially after you've heard a whole bunch about how to do control warding, can be a little overwhelming and lead to people making poor decisions, and I'd really like to avoid that. So first off, blue side control ward flow. For the bot lane, this pixel brush is the default position, right? The pixel brush is the default position for a few reasons. The biggest one is that it gives you river control, right? You can see both entrances, you can see the bot lane entrance, you can see the top lane entrance. This protects you from ganks. So this is where you want to place your ward when the lane is in an even state, right? When both teams have access to the river, and equal access to the river. If you're shoved in, you just move the ward back, move it back to your tri-bush, and notice how it's in the back half of the tri-bush, not the top half, right? This means they have to walk up further to auto-attack it. This really isn't anything fancy. This is probably something you're doing in your games currently. If you're not, obviously you should adapt this. This is the same as solo queue, I believe, as it is in 5v5. So post 14 minutes for us to get access to the river, we want to have push plus bush, right? So you can see here, this is where the default mid lane control ward goes. This changes a little bit based on blue and red side, and we'll talk about that. But the basics are you want to be able to get push in the mid lane, you want to have control of the bush so you can enter, and then all you have to worry about is the enemy jungle entrance, right? This is the basics for a few reasons, the biggest of them being that the minion wave acts as vision for you, right? So now the enemy can't kind of sneak in or behind your vision, and again, I want to reiterate, this isn't just about mid lane, this is about the side lanes as well. If you want to enter from bot lane or enter from top lane, which is something that WE does pretty frequently, you're going to want to get control of that pixel brush and have the pushing wave. Pre 14 minutes, jungle should be warding the mid brush, not the mid laner. This is in 5v5, and you ward the side of the objective you want to take. The reason for this is that mid laners need all the gold that they can get to be able to survive their lane, while junglers, I think that them getting the gold early is important, right? And this isn't really within the scope of the video, but I think it's important, especially with sundered junglers, to be able to get access to that gold. I do think the 75 is better spent by them. Just these two wards, right, you can see on your map here, are able to control river. And this isn't, again, anything crazy, but you can tell both teams are doing this, right? You can see WE's control wards are taking control of the dragon side of the river, while BLG, I believe in this case, is taking control of the top side of river. So here we have an example of WE looking to push down the tier 2 on bot side. They're using the Herald to do this, and as you can see, the control wards have all moved up, right? They have a control ward here in Banana, they have a control ward here in the entrance to the blue side jungle, and another one here in Tribush, right? The control wards move up as you try to siege down more and more objectives. Obviously, they've cleared out the vision from AL, and AL's vision is now stuck on the top side of the map, right? Because we're not fighting for the top side. You can see all the people are on the bottom side, right? This is a good example of WE using their control wards in just really simple locations to be able to facilitate these types of map movements. Now, wards should also be defendable. I think this is the most important thing to point out. As you can see here, they have 5 control wards down, and each one of these is in a location where WE is going to feel comfortable fighting, right? These are choke points, which are really good for Ahri, really good for Ezreal, and they're places where if the enemy tries to walk up to clear the vision, WE has an overwhelming presence and is probably going to be able to stop them from clearing it. I do think if you were to ask them, would you rather have this Tribush ward or a ward over here on the blue buff or on the entrance here, they'd probably choose to push it up, but obviously we can't allow perfect to be the enemy of the good. This is a very good ward setup. The wards are pushed up. They even have wards like this one here to protect from TP flanks, which is something WE does a lot. Now, another example here of ward encroachment which is just what I'm talking about when I say the wards need to push up. You can see this ward here has made its way from this bush up into the wolves. And the reason for this is that when you're sieging down on the tier 3 or tier 2 in mid lane, teams love to place a ward over here to watch your map movements, right, when you're trying to 4-1. So pushing this ward up to here prevents them from getting vision and prevents them from seeing your map movements, so you can more easily play with a man advantage to get one of the towers. And again, the same concept applies to Baron. I don't want you to think that just because we're focusing on Dragon, it's because there's an abundance of examples. You can see, once again, WE has placed down the vision here, right? They're trying to look for mid-push. That's why they've invested 3 people here. And they're obviously control warding the pit, as well as AL. And when you're losing, I want you to remember, in order, you should be trying to ward the jungle entrances, then the camps, and then your gates. Right? You ward the entrances to prevent them from getting free access to the jungle. You ward the camps, so at least when they're stealing your camps, you can see them. That'll allow you to make better decisions. And then lastly, you ward the gates, because at this point, you're being sieged on. You just want to make sure you can see enemy map movements, right? And this is an example here of WE in a losing game to BLG, where you can see that they're doing this exact strategy, right? Some of the wards are watching entrances, some of them are watching camps, and some are watching gates as they're being sieged down. This is, I think, a perfect example of not just giving into one of these strategies, because where your towers are and where the enemies are should change and dictate how you want to place these wards. So don't think about this as a monolithic, oh, we're being sieged and the game is looking like we're at tier 3, so we need to only place wards at gates. Like, obviously, if you can get wards on your camps, that's good. If you can even get an entrance ward, that's still good. The problem is these won't be defensible. So I think this is a ward that's probably existing, right? The banana bush one. And it's only existing because no one has cleared it yet. I don't think WE will defend this. I'm pretty sure this is an earlier ward. But the rest of them are in pretty defensible positions, especially with a Ryze and a Jhin and a Jarvan and a Shen, right? So defending your wards together should be prepared to fight the enemy around them. I think this is what I'm really trying to harp on with this defensive warding, right? And as you can see here, this is like Lulu setting a trap for Caitlyn, right? I think the memes just make the slide a little better and also kind of illustrate the point. So we're going to watch a clip here from WE on how they do defensible wards. As you can see, Owen is trying to clear this vision. Jhin and Nico are doing their best to just poke him out. They're not even trying to take a hard engage here, right? You don't see Nico going in with an E. You don't see Jhin like flash auto Wing, not that he would ever do that. But my point is that they're not doing anything to overexert themselves. They're just controlling the vision while they allow for the Olaf to take the objective. We get a quick look at topside here, which isn't really important to this. Obviously, I can't control the spectator, right? And it should pan back to bot lane. You see Olaf has taken the dragon and no one has died, I think is the really important thing I want to focus on here. Just because you're defending your wards doesn't mean you have to get into a fight with the enemy. It doesn't mean you have to kill them. It just means that you have to put yourself in a position where they can't clear the vision without taking damage that would make the fight unwinnable or would lead to them getting killed. And obviously these teams are good enough that BLG isn't going to push the issue over this Pixel Brush ward. They don't have their jungler there. They can't make a play on Dragon. But also, WE is good enough to not allow for BLG to make the entrance onto the pit and try to go 2 for 2 or, 1 for 2 or whatever it is and stop the Dragon or get the kills. Okay. We're going to look at blue side defense now, which we kind of alluded to on the last slide. Again, this is the default position for the wards. As you can see, we've moved from real pictures to kind of the Rift Kit pictures. And notice how we're using the banana brush on whichever side we have banana brush on. So for blue side, it's on the top half of the map. This is a better ward location than the long brush, but the long brush, obviously when you don't have banana brush, is the best place to put it. You're going to want to keep wards in the bushes, especially early game. If we don't have priority, we just move the wards back a spot, right? And as you can tell, they're kind of watching entrances here. The reason that you move this ward back over to here is that it's just a bit more defensible from the mid laner, but also you can move it back to here if you really feel necessary. The point of these is that we're moving the wards back in to watch our jungle entrances into places where we're going to be more ready to defend them. Next, you can see we're protecting our camps, right? And this is kind of the ward I alluded to earlier. Obviously, this isn't the ideal priority position because this ward here is not going to watch the entrance, so they can always get access to your blue. But if you have down just these 4 wards here, you'll see every single one of your camps, or at least the entrance to your camps, except for the Krugs here. And that'll be the support's job, right, to try to ward the fairy light or fairy circle here. The point is, you're pushing the wards back as the game progresses forward. And lastly, the wards kind of converge, and we only have 2. At this point, we're just doing base defense. If these are control words, that's great because it stops the enemy from getting the vision down. It also stops them from blocking the vision for you, but also obviously the support can ward these. I think it's better to have the support doing things like warding over these walls, so that way you can catch enemy map rotations. So if anyone can control ward these, even if it's the support and the jungler, it's helpful to the team. These are just good wards if you're living under your tower. I didn't want you to think that like these are the only spots you can place them. You can also place control wards here and here if you're just stuck under your tower all game, because what these do is prevent the enemy jungler from coming behind you for a tower dive, right? If you have nothing else that you can do and you're just stuck under tower, I think these are both fine ward locations. I do think when you're defending your tier 2, either on the bot side here or the top side, right, on the mirror, this bush here in particular is essential to making the defense. And it's also essential to making the offense. This watches every single one of the entrances, right? You can see there's 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, if you count them that way. You can also just count them as 4. I think it's 5, though, really. It's watching 5 different ways to get into this tower and make a dive happen. I would say this ward is absolutely essential. If you don't have this ward, you should feel incredibly uncomfortable defending the bot tier 2, and should probably be defending it from like back here until your team can push up and get some vision, even if it's just bodies, right? Because bodies provide vision too, obviously, and then you can make the defense here. All right, let's move on to offense. Again, we stay at the same default position. You'll notice nothing has changed. And if we have priority, right, and this isn't just priority, this is strong priority. This means that like you are living under the enemy tower, essentially. You can push these wards up into new locations because you now are going to be playing further up on the map, so you can make the rotations more easily and defend these locations. I think that these wards are still good because they're watching the same entrances, they're giving the same amount of information. The problem is if the enemy jungler can get behind them, you no longer have this type of river information for a lot of them, and the river not being warded is going to make it pretty tough to tell where the jungler can go because they can do anything, right? For example, if the jungler moves past Tri here, now the jungler can like come, jump behind Pit, can run behind Tribush, and all of these different types of map movements that make it pretty tough. Same thing with this ward in particular, right? Where like, you know, now the jungler has full access to the river if both of these are pushed up. Normally in a game, 5v5, you're only going to have like 1, maybe 2 of these advanced wards. And it really requires for your jungler to be willing to match the enemy if they try to invade. But also if the enemy invades and you have strong priority, you should be like willing to kill them, right? So I think it's not as big of an issue for the better teams, but if you're playing in like an IBSG or a Platinum League, you're probably going to want to make sure that you keep them more in the default position. Maybe 1 strong priority ward if you're just genuinely stomping someone in a lane. All right, when we're sieging tier 2s, as you can tell, these wards move way up, right? And the reason for this is that we now want to watch the gates entrances and the kind of like rotations to be able to stop you from getting the tier 2s. Obviously, you're not going to be sieging on all tier 2s at the same time. Most of the time, 4-1 is better than 1-3-1. 1-3-1 kind of died a long time ago. If you are 1-3-1ing, maybe you'll have all 4 of these wards down, but normally you want to try to overload a side of the map and just play through mid plus one of the other lanes. But this is still a good example of the flow of how the wards move. And then lastly, when we're on this sieging tier 3 point, we don't just stop placing wards like we do on defense where we just have 1. We still want to protect from these wards, which would stop map rotations, right? We kind of talked about this. We pointed this one out. We saw WE place this Wolves ward here. So we're going to move our wards up, and this one also, again, prevents the Fairy Light, which is why control warding this can be good, because the enemy can stop it with a control ward, and now you'd need your ADC to push up just into the gate, which leaves them vulnerable to something like a play over the wall, right? I think these are all solid board locations. Now, this is what I was talking about earlier, where I said you're going to try to overload a side of the map. This is an example of only needing, right, 1 of these pairs. You don't need all of these wards. You could just have this ward and this ward, and you're still pretty comfortable. You could also have like this ward and this ward, and you're still pretty comfortable here. And if you remember, WE had something like a ward here on Wolves and a ward here, or actually it was even further back, but a ward here on Red, essentially, right? It was a little back. I think it was in the Tribush. And the point is that if you think about this, I like to visualize it like water, right? If water is flowing in, will the water get, plugged up by the wards and by the vision that it creates? Obviously, if you have this ward and this ward, it would. If you have this ward and this ward, you leave this massive gap open, right? So you want to have pairs, if that makes sense. I think it does. Just visualize it like you want to make sure you can at least see wherever they come in through the entrances. And you could even have all 4 of these wards and be extra safe. I think all 4 of these is perfect, but we don't want to let perfect be the enemy of the good. Same thing here, we're going to look at the mid and the top. You only need the pairs, right? And the pairs can work anyway. The only thing is we don't want to have a vertical pair, because the same idea applies here, right? If like they overload your top side and you don't have a ward here or a ward here, they can just walk in now. And still your vision's going to catch them, but by the time it catches them here, if you're sieging like a tier 3, for example, you're out of position now, right? And that forces you to walk into the enemy bot side jungle. You're definitely losing the siege and you might even die. Cool. You don't need to clear vision when sieging. You just need vision of enemy rotations. This is something you've probably heard me say a whole lot, right? That rotations, that's what we're trying to spot, especially on defense. I think this is a good example from WE where they're not exactly making the play happen. Yeah, the ads are inevitable. They're not exactly making the play happen because they're defending the vision. They're making the play happen because the vision is allowing them to catch the enemy rotation. So you can see here, Monkey is in mid lane on the Nefiri. The other 4 members of WE are sieging bot lane, right? AL full defends with 5. They push up, get poked out. They are in a 6k gold deficit here. Monkey's going to be able to take down the inhib tower, and now AL's pushing over towards Monkey, but they're not exactly making a full push, so they come back, right? They're just holding the wave, so Monkey's going to push up. He spots them here because of the Nico clone. Now they get this ward over the wall so they can see 100% what AL's rotations are. And you can see they full collapse here onto Cube, and AL's now taking a 5v4. And this is where some teams may think, we want our top laner to be the solo. Obviously, Monkey can play this position here. He's playing an assassin. I think this is a good use of him. And now we catch them all in the rotation, right? They're going to clear some vision out. None of that matters, though, because we've spotted them, and WE is able to push up and take this bottom lane inhibitor, right? And this is a really, really clean example of what it looks like to try to just play based off of enemy rotations. And finally, we're going to kind of see here what I mean by you don't always want your top laner to be the 1 in a 1-4. In this case, I think assassins who do very good cleanup work are probably best to be able to play that solo lane as long as they're as mobile as Nefiri, because obviously Monkey comes in and there's just no way that AL can play with their health bars that low against this champion, right? And from here, WE ends up closing out the game. Cool. So let's look at red side control ward flow. This is the default position, right? Again, we're looking, we have Pixel Brush, and this time we're using the Banana Brush on bot side. Obviously, these wards are tending to be on the bottom half of the map because teams are going to be fighting over Dragon, right? In this case, Monkey has just taken the Dragon. You can see it by this little icon here. Not that I speak Mandarin, but you can see it on the right side too, right? It says he just killed the Dragon, Chemtech. Next, if you're shoved in pot, you just move the wards back to the Tribush, right? So obviously the Karma Sivir lane is going to push in the Bard Ezreal, so they push their ward back to the Tribush. This is still defendable, and it's in a position where it's going to allow them to prevent dives and prevent themselves from having no vision. And still this ward stays here in the mid lane, right? On this Banana Brush, you'll notice they haven't pushed it anywhere else. Post 14 minutes, we want push plus bush. So you can see here that AL is pushing in the mid lane on the minimap in the bottom right, and they still have the ward in the bush, on both bushes actually, and this kind of allows them to have control over the river, so Lee Sin is incapable of just running in. If he tries to, then the Sivir Bard are going to rotate and catch the Lee Sin out. Same stuff as blue side, so we'll go a little quicker. Pre-14 minutes, we want the jungle to ward the mid bush. This is the same idea, right? This ward here is being done by Monkey. It's not being done by Karis because Karis needs the gold. And you ward the side the objective you want. The objective they want in this case is the dragon. Just these two wards control river. The difference here being that we're using the banana bush now because we are on this half of the map. This would be the same thing if you were watching Baron and you were on the blue side, right? Controlling the back of pit is essential on this side. This is the difference, I think, the biggest one between red and blue side. Blue side, you need to defend the back of pit on Baron, but that tends to be a kind of trivial thing because with Baron, it's so late into the game that teams are either dead or completely on vision when you're taking the Baron, so you tend to have control of the pit, the back of pit, sorry. But here you can see that Victor is controlling the back of pit at 12 minutes into the game, and he's doing it with the use of a control ward, right? This is a forward control ward, and this is essential. If you're not clearing out the blast cone here and you're not putting someone or some wards in the back of pit, you allow the enemy jungler to jump in, especially when it's someone like Zhana and Wukong, right? He's going to be invisible. It's incredibly hard to stop Wukong from stealing. And again, the wards should be defensible and move. So this is an example here of WE defending a ward and even clearing out some vision while they fight for Dragon against AL. And as you can see, they have push, right? And they didn't get bush control, so this is why they're kind of eating Rumble ults, and they're forced to use their own ultimates to be able to get in here. This is a pretty tough position for them, and it's because they weren't able to establish that vision control early. They only got push. But the super minions in the bottom lane are definitely aiding them. And again, same concept applies to Baron. We take Baron by pushing control wards into the enemy entrances, as you can see on the minimap. I believe there's even a ward here on Banana on this play. I just couldn't get a clean clip of it. And when we're on defense, we're warding out the jungle entrances, the camps, and then the gates. This is another one where it was just tough to find a great screenshot, but you can see both the gates are being control warded, and they even have a ward inside of their gate in this case, so that way they can stop the enemy from seeing their rotations, right? Red side has to mark enemies behind the pit, and you need to have an exit strategy. I didn't have a meme for this page. I couldn't find one, so I just gave you a picture of my dog. Say hi to Frosty. Cool. So we actually saw a still of this play earlier. As you can see, it starts with BLG making a pretty aggressive move onto WE. Owen gets caught onto the trap. I think this is just like a mistake by him. And he is able to get out just barely. And obviously, this is a good time to mention that when you're trying to make a play for an earlier dragon, you do want to try to gank a lane and at least force them out. You don't need to kill them, but at least forcing them out of lane gives you that type of control where you know you're going to have a man advantage on the dragon. Remember, we said this isn't over, though, because they're now playing on red side, right? And they're playing against Wukong, and this is where you're going to see Karis just really simply walks up using the control word and the vision he has, drops down his ultimate. He's not even looking for a kill. He's just forcing the Wukong out. He said, look, you can't force yourself into me. And with this, WE's able to take this dragon, right? And again, notice they didn't have to kill anybody. I think this is something that teams really overemphasize, especially at a low level, is like, we need to get the kills to be able to do this. I think you need to fight, but fighting doesn't always mean you need to overextend and greed for the kills. Sometimes you can get a lot just from forcing the enemy out of lane. Cool, let's look at red side defense now. These are the default positions. As you can tell, this ward is swapped, right? Push the wards back. And again, this is what I'm saying, where you can either use this long brush or you can use this bush here. It's really up to you. It is kind of tough to pick one. I think it depends a lot on which mid laner you have, right? And a mobile mid laner is probably going to want to keep the ward here in this long brush, while a more mobile one might even push it back to here, right? Or sorry, other way around. A mobile one might want to keep it in the long brush, while an immobile one might want to push it here because they're more susceptible to get dived or dove. Push the wards back. This is just a little advancement on what we talked about last time. Last time, the flow looked like one ward for one ward, but this time, as you can see, there's like 3 different locations that we can place the wards, right? I don't want you to think that just because the schema tells you to protect camps, that you have to protect camps with one particular ward. All 3 of these wards, right, for example, protect a camp. And you could even sacrifice this one if you really wanted to. I wouldn't, because this is an entrance here, and it gives you a lot of good vision. But this is a hotly contested bush, and sometimes you'll have to push the ward back all the way to here, right? An example of using gates and watching camps at the same time. So don't think about these wards as like monolithic flows. Remember that sometimes they branch off and they watch different bushes. And normally you're placing these into bushes, especially on defense. Lastly, we protect gates by placing it on the fairy charm, fairy circle, fairy ring, one of these. This is just for supports, but I wanted to remind you that TP wards are strong for an imminent base siege. If you can get these wards down early enough, this is something WE protects against a lot by placing control wards behind them, but these types of wards allow you to get a flank off, normally from the top or the mid laner, whoever's best at this, and these flanks can allow you to get a pincer where you catch the enemy on both sides, and it makes it really hard to protect their squishies. Cool, let's look at offense. Again, it's very similar to blue side, so it's going to go kind of quick. Default position. Notice banana brush, pixel brush. Wards get pushed up. We're now still watching the entrances, but these are in strong priority positions, right? And now we're watching the camps, because that's what we want, right? We want to take this gold and come away from the enemy. And this here is an example of using vision denial, right? Remember, we have this ward here to deny here, this ward here to deny there, this ward that WE really loves. All of these wards, except for the one on the blue buff, are being used for vision denial. And they're used in conjunction with past wards, right? So like we might sometimes have wards that are lingering in spots from earlier. And what this really is an example of is a 1-4, and we're sieging the tier 2 top and the mid tier 3. So as you can tell, right, we've placed vision here because the enemy could still make rotations through here. I think that that's why the blue ward is important, even if it's not like just watching rotations. It is because the tier 2 in this example is still alive. Last, we got an example of a 4-1 where we're sieging a bottom tier 3 and a mid tier 2. I thought it was important to give you both. And as you can tell, we've moved this ward back, which still protects against TP flanks. I don't think this is essential for most teams. WE really likes it. And I understand. I think if your opponents aren't placing wards like this, you don't have to worry about this and you can save the gold income. And as you can see, the bulk of the ward investment is on the bottom half of the map because that's where we want to rotate and where the enemy wants to rotate through, right? We want to push the advantage and get a number advantage on one of the lanes. This vision denial allows you to do that. Leaves open this gap right here, which is why this ward sometimes, the one in this other long brush, can be pushed up, as we've seen in other examples. Cool. Even when the vision's cleared, it still provides information for fights. This is the best example of that. Yeah, I can't control the ads in PowerPoint. It was so nice. They wanted to see it twice. Cool. Oh, so here you're going to see WE has a ward down in the banana brush. They have another ward down behind the pit. This is similar to what we saw in the Victor example where Karis was able to control the pit from back there, right? And now BLG is going to push up. They're going to clear out the banana brush. We now know that enemies can be there. We know that they've pushed off. Monkey's going to use his sweeper to come in. They're going to clear out the enemy vision. And this also gives BLG the information, which is why On is able to make this flank, right? And honestly, this is just a good reaction here from WE. But later what you're going to see is that the vision that's left alive also makes a difference for them. And that's this ward on the top side is why Monkey's able to push out the Jarvan and feels comfortable jumping over the back of the pit before coming back in to secure the dragon. So as you can tell here, both teams use the information of where the wards had been and where the enemies had been to kind of influence their decisions, right? On for the flank, Monkey for the jump over the wall, and the team to decide to enter bot side instead of entering the top half of the map or even through their own banana because they understood the enemy could be there. All right, so let's go over the do nots of warding. Do not sacrifice tempo because of lack of control wards. If you have an advantage where you've killed 3 enemies and all of you are alive or 4 of you are alive, push the advantage. Don't say, oh, we need to recall and get control wards. Don't overthink it. Okay, never give up tempo just because you lack control wards. Do not let perfect be the enemy of the good. I've said it a few times here, right? Just because I have these schemas that I've shown you and I've said this is like kind of the perfect idea of how we want to do a siege on this tower with the, the situation we might be in, you can always give up a ward here or there. Just remember the pairs that we talked about. Try to always have vision, and you can supplement some of the vision with green, right? With the regular stealth wards from supports. Do not delay item spikes for control wards. I'm telling you right now, it's more important that you have your Guardian Angel or your Infinity Edge or whatever else than it is to have a control ward, right? Your Sundered Sky. All of these are more important than having control wards. Never, ever, ever sacrifice your item spikes for control wards. The only exception to this is like maybe a support on a key fight where the team doesn't have them. And it kind of depends on what the support item is. I think something like a Mikhail's Crucible is probably more important than, the control ward in a lot of cases, especially if it's just like one extra and you already have one. Do not clear vision without priority or a friend. Just because we talked about how we want to defend wards and we want to be able to clear vision here, you should never be pushing in and trying to do this without either having the ability to have a friendly come help you or having a friendly right there with you holding your hand. Do not spend too much on wards when behind. I think the further behind you get in the game, the less money we can invest into wards, which is weird because it's the more that we kind of need them. But I think in particular, control wards are the thing we just can't keep investing in. We just have to assume the enemy are there, and we should place these wards even further back, right? Because the number one way to spend less money on wards, well, number one way would be to not buy them, but the number one way, if you're still trying to buy them, is to place them in positions where the enemy can't clear them. Don't be afraid to adapt the plan. Just because I've shown you a lot of good ward locations doesn't mean that you might not have a location of your own that works in a particular situation, and you should feel comfortable using those wards. Right? Example of this is like dropping control wards right before or during a fight. I think this is something that a lot of teams do, and some teams don't. I do this even in my solo queue games. I'll drop a ward down in a banana brush if we're all fighting around it because it stops the enemy from being able to get vision there. Control ward to clear enemy TP wards, right? If there's a ward and we don't have a sweeper available, don't be afraid to just like control ward it. You get rid of it, you still control the vision. I mean, obviously it's not like optimal in terms of gold efficiency, but you'll prefer to have the vision a lot of the times and to know the enemy doesn't. And we can word debate fights. So this is the last example that I'll leave you with. I think this is a really good one. And this is an example of WE baiting BLG into a fight using control wards in particular. What they're going to do here is they're going to stack wards. So they're going to use a stealth ward with a control ward, right? As you can see, On just placed it on the top of your screen. He's going to clear out the enemy vision. They now think there's only a control ward here. Or sorry, Urha, not On, my bad. They push up. And now he's going to place down a little stealth ward. He channels his recall, but they kind of realize that there's a chance they might be able to catch the enemy here. This is also called the tempo trap. And as you can see, Monkey is running down here to do this. He doesn't have camps up to clear. So the Karma is going to push up. She clears the control ward. She feels safe. They kind of saw what was happening. They haven't seen Urha in a while. And now he's going to use his Bard portal over the wall. Monkey's going to come in. About's going to collapse on him. And all this happened because they placed down a control ward and a stealth ward and were able to catch On out and see him push up into a position where he wasn't safe. On also broke one of our key rules here, which is like not to try to clear vision without priority, without a PAL, right? Didn't have priority from Sivir, he didn't have a PAL with him. And even if he did, honestly, he probably still dies there because Monkey made a beeline for this and they're able to secure Dragon off of this play. All right, I hope you enjoyed. I hope you learned something. I don't have a problem with RE cosplayers. I just thought it was funny. And if you have your own 5v5 team or other topics you want to see, just like hit me up. I'm willing to try to cover them. I have a pretty in-depth experience here playing with different, 5v5 teams and coaching them. My own teams, we take a really aggressive stance. Maybe it's not perfect for everyone, but maybe it's perfect for you. Thanks.